this is episode never you fucking mind what number of Narrative Week, because I want to be able to release this whenever I want to, not feel beholden to a bunch of plebs who just tell me every week, when am I going to get Loco Doco as my permanent co-host? It's quite frankly rude. Not least because you presume that I would want to have Loco Doco as my permanent co-host. And if you know anything about a man I do appreciate, Loco Doco, he's a perfect example. And by the way, I'm in this category absolutely as well. People who, for 20 minutes, yeah, they're great to be around. You know, diminishing returns after that. And when you know you're going to have to be around them every single week, it gets a bit tiresome, if anything, you know. You get kind of tired of their shit. But speaking of people who are tired of my shit, we've got here usual co-host, Kelsey Moser, as I said, beloved co-host, the people's co-host in many ways, who
sure.
Everything's improved. You know, just like H2K went from like, what was it, 1 to 8 or something, to that like 7 to 3 record. She went from whatever potato she used to use to film herself to perfect lighting. She looks as though she's had her hair, like, I don't really know how women do this. I assume like straightened and then curled with like one of those things that they do. Do you want to know something sad? I literally went a long time in my life without realizing that all women who have those curls at the end of the hair, that was actually done in a hair studio, that the hair isn't just naturally like... Yeah, I was one of these people. I'm one of these people that these things are designed for. Our guest for this episode is Croissant. Now, here's the thing. I normally started out by sort of jabbing at Croissant, like, oh, you know, student, you know, looks like a typical generic Asian guy. But here's the thing. He's obviously taken some of it to heart, Kelsey, because he's gone away, and now he's got that haircut that they get when they're getting a bit dangerous, you know. They sort of have a little criminal element, they know. They're hanging around with people who are in cars that are doing donuts and in school yards and stuff. He's got him with a bad crowd now. I know he's running with LS, so anything's possible at this point in time, but... I don't know. This is a new era for Croissant. So this episode... Oh, by the way, one last thing to mention. Like, you can bet on League of Legends. There we go. Now I don't have to put a 20-second advert at the front of this. You just heard me say that. And you can bet on League of Legends esports pools, right? That solved that. So, just lazy. Saving myself editing. So this episode, the theme is going to be... Obviously, it's the off-season in terms of we're all waiting for MSI. No, I am not going to force people to endure an LPL episode. So already some people wiping sweat off their brow. Whew, I don't have to pretend to care about that region. This is going to be one of those episodes where we pick a topic that isn't necessarily grounded in the present moment as much. And so this one is going to be, because I thought with the NALCS finals just finishing, and the two people battling in the finals at the jungle position, Xmithie and Meteos, a lot of people might not know this, but they are the players that have been in the most finals in the NALCS, actually. Obviously, Meteos, people know he was in Cloud9, but people forget, obviously, even at the end of Cloud9, he snuck one in towards the end there. He was obviously in this one with 100 Thieves. Xmithie obviously had all the CLG ones, but now he's obviously gotten this one with Team Liquid. And I thought, right, as a topic... Who is the best NALCS/NA region jungler of all time? And for this one, actually, funnily enough, it doesn't matter about imports, because actually, if you look at the shortlist, there haven't really been that many really great jungle imports, and obviously, typically, Koreans haven't tended to go to NA for that position anyway. So if you look at it, generally, I think you'd probably come down to a shortlist with the two names I just mentioned, Xmithie, Meteos. Depending on era, people might throw in other people. Obviously, if you go back far enough in time, the St. Viciouses of the world, etc. So I thought for the episode, we could already do it one anyway, where we just discussed who it is, etc. But it just so happened, without having to artificially create strife, because you know how I hate to do that, I actually did find two people who have a different opinion on this topic, on who the best is. So Kelsey, as you might have noticed by some of the last few episodes, is an admirer of Meteos and picks him as the best now and actually best in history. And Croissant here went with the guy who was on the other side of the final, Xmithie, CLG, Vulcan, now Team Liquid. So even though I do think it's certainly possible to debate, and if you have a point you want to get at with each other, you can do that. On the one hand, I want to say it is generally a discussion. Like, it doesn't all have to just be debate over, like, this is my guy's the best for this reason, and your guy's, we are going to discuss topic. But I'm good with either way, as long as it's interesting, basically. So let's start out with this, okay? Kelsey, give me a basic, like, opening, broad strokes reason as to why Meteos is the best NA region jungler for you ever.
I think the narrative of Meteos was a bit maligned or improperly told, partly because in season 3, he was doing stuff that retroactively makes a lot more sense now, I think, if you go back and watch his games, because he had this reputation of, he's just taking all the farms from the laners, he's just showing up to lane to steal farm and all this other thing, but he actually a lot of times was doing something that I think a lot of junglers have only started catching up now, which is resetting the waves for the laners and making sure that when their laners came back to lane, they had like priority on push. They didn't have to overextend to get the wave, things like that. So I think that there was a lot of stuff that just like you appreciate Meteos way more now from that lens. And even in season 3, without like that kind of appreciation for what he was doing, you understood that he was like extremely efficient with his time. Meteos always knows where he needs to be on the map. Meteos always knows like what side is his strong side, and Meteos is just like, he's not wasting time, really. Like, he's getting the camps that he needs, and then he's taking the windows that he has from having tempo, from having level advantages or farm advantages to make something happen on the map, and that's something that he evolved to do more and more and more, and has gotten better and better with over time. So I feel like he's a jungler who has like evolved and changed and situationally managed to adapt to metas, which is something that I think puts him ahead of a lot of other junglers who will have a type or a specific way that they play that seems only relevant in a particular period.
Well, maybe we'll do it like this then. We'll talk about both of the junglers separately, and then we'll do some sort of a head-to-head or comparison and contrast. So, Croissant, what do you think of when you think of Meteos?
Yeah, so I think of all the same things as Kelsey mentioned. Definitely think Meteos burst onto the scene as just the premier jungler and was pushing for, not that he like innovated the style of heavy jungling and like efficient pathing, but he was the only person in North America really doing it at a really high level when Cloud9 first entered 2013. But at the same time, I thought Meteos was going to go the way of I will dominate. He wasn't in the cards for me in 2018. It felt like he was losing a lot of motivation after the different misaligned narratives and a lot of the community criticism that came towards him in Cloud9. And even though he did pretty well in Phoenix 1, the organization had a terrible summer split right after their third place finish in spring. So I was really surprised and also like glad to see Meteos come back. And I definitely think that he has been a consistent and premier jungler in North America, but I don't know how much he's actually evolved throughout the metas. I think he's adapted to playing things like Skarner when he has to play them in season 8. But at the end of the day, I think his strengths have always kind of remained the same. And the reason that I think Xmithie, which we're going to get to later, but just as a preliminary thing, is sure. I feel like Xmithie has been more adaptive, has played with people usually view him as like a duo with Pobelter, but he played with Cloud, Mandatory Cloud. He played with Huhi and a bunch of different supports and AD carries as well. And so I think it's a lot of assumptions that you have to make about Meteos, because I'm sure he's a great teammate and a great guy, but I don't know how much of like his leadership qualities come to mind when you think about, who's the best North American jungler? Well, I think it isn't like a clear-cut Xmithie is head and shoulders above Meteos, because Meteos definitely has strengths. Like, people memed Meteos as Lee Sin, but his Lee Sin, Elise were just fantastic early on in North America and really didn't have any competition. Whereas Xmithie, would lose 100% of his Lee Sin games back in season 4 or 3, something like that. So, yeah, that's all I have for Meteos right now, though.
All right, what about this then, Kelsey? So one of the things that people will actually attack is exactly what you initially presented as his strength, which was his initial style when he came into the LCS. So for people who don't remember, he was so efficient with his ganks and generally farmed so much that famously in like that promotion tournament where they played two teams, Complexity and then a team before that, I remember he had something ridiculous like 45 KDA or something because he never died, and obviously then all the kills and assists, like the way that's always been calculated, it's got to be one of the stupidest stats ever because if you don't die it just becomes a completely worthless number. But okay, as if to show the point, and then I believe it was something like it was at least the first like something like 4 or 5 games he never died once. So obviously that's immediately going to set in people's mind like this guy can't be ganking all over the place non-stop, like he must be picking and choosing when he does it. Now if you remember, the narrative of his first season was they were so dominant in NA, but even before they got to Worlds a lot of people were saying, well, no one else really does this style right now. Like in Europe, for example, everyone instead was like, like non-stop play like Elise and just ganking 24/7 pretty much because it was the assassin meta and you tried to get people rolling as soon as you could. And obviously in Korea, you had all those amazing junglers who didn't typically, aside from... In fact, in Season 3, I can't think of any that really were like super passive in that sense. So when he got to Worlds and obviously they just got eliminated straight away by Fnatic, a lot of people actually saw that as like a weakness. Like they were like, obviously it was a strength in one sense, but it seemed as though he wasn't willing to adapt or change in that. So was you're billing this as a strength. Now, what would you address as to criticisms of that?
So yeah, first, so I'm going to answer that, and then I have like a couple of questions from Croissant's opening that I want to go back to as well. So I'm just going to preface that. So the first part that you're asking, like, what are some criticisms that I would have of his style, or
well, how would you respond to criticisms of it?
Oh,
People
okay.
said, for example, he didn't understand the meta at the time, or he played a one-dimensional style that other people could predict or something like that, or just, well, the most simple way to say it is if you're playing a style that only you play and then you don't succeed with it, you can have a hard time telling people it was the right style to play.
So I think famously Meteos has been compared to like Saint Vicious, for example, where Saint Vicious was always just farming, and Saint Vicious made the comment like, of course, you're going to look really good if your lanes are always winning, so you have all this time to farm and you have all this time to do this. I think that Cloud9 had emphasized a lot of things in draft that allowed that Meteos to take over the map, but also because of the way that some of their laners played, or because they weren't necessarily 100% resetting on the right time or able to get backs, like there's a difference in how Meteos went to lane and took farm compared to how Saint Vicious went to lane and took farm. Like if you're looking specifically at like the Fnatic Cloud9 series at Worlds, I noticed there was a wave where Hai was playing like Gragas against Xpeke, and then you would assume that, like, knowing the typical narrative of Meteos, that he would just go and he would be taking the entire wave while Hai was like forced to back or something, but all he did was he took 2 minions to make sure that the wave would bounce, and that he would come back and be able to get that Hai would come back and be able to get the wave like at his turret and be fine. So he wasn't necessarily doing that. Also, like if Balls, for example, was behind in a push, or the enemy top laner backed first, he would be in Balls' lane and helping Balls push the wave to turret so that Balls could like catch up in tempo. So things like this that I think have been mischaracterized a little bit are subtle differences between like the solo queue jungler who just is coming to your lane and taking all your farm and trying to become a monster that 1v9s later on in the game, which I think is how people have described Meteos a lot. So I think that if that is your take on him, is just that he was like constantly costing his laners and that he was only able to get away with a lot of the stuff and a lot of the pressure, I would challenge you to go back to the VODs and see if you're noticing some of these instances, because a lot of times, like if his laners made a mistake or something like this happened, the lanes could come back and have the same amount of pressure or have the same amount of priority that they did before, because Meteos was helping them in this wave with these wave resets. So
let me just check something, right? So is the inference here that basically Meteos was like years ahead of how to jungle?
I feel like in a lot of ways he was. I wouldn't necessarily say that like you can put this on every single region or every single sense, but at least in North America, I think he was definitely years ahead, for sure. But because like now a lot of people have only started talking about some of the stuff that he was doing in reference to other teams, like in the past couple of years in the public sense. They've only started talking about how jungles help mid laners reset and have started viewing it that way instead of like the junglers taxing farm. Whereas I felt like Meteos was distinctively doing this in season 3 already. So I would say that he's at least ahead of like public perception of what the jungler is supposed to do in a lot of ways. So.
Okay. Croissant, what do you have to, I'll put a pin in the thing you said, Kelsey, so I'll come back after this. But Croissant, what would you have to say on this topic? The idea that like he was years ahead in doing this and that this was what he was actually trying to do in the game, specifically almost in a macro sense.
I feel like that is it's definitely possible, but it's also a leap that we can't necessarily make. I tried to look at some of the VODs as well, and while that's true, I think, when I first watched a lot of these C9 games, I was like 15, 16, maybe younger, I don't remember. And I remember a couple of team fights where Cloud9 would just ace 4v5 and Meteos would be coming out of the jungle and just, level 14 or something. Enemy jungle is level 11. I do think that a lot of his decisions to, help balls out or help high out if they made a mistake in lane and reset was just something that the other teams didn't know how to deal with because this window to punish the enemy team wasn't there anymore. But I do think also at the same time that, what if Meteos took 1 or 2 less camps and spent more time just hanging out and preemptively looking for this window to gank the enemy laner that like burned Ball's flash or when Ball made a mistake. You can turn those situations around in that way into a victory for your team. And so I think that I can't say that Meteos' decisions were strictly wrong, but I also don't think I would say that they were innovative for his time. I think he had a style of playing in the jungle that was what C9 needed, but how much did he study, or how much did teams in general in North America study Korea or like had a path and stuff? And I think there was definitely room for improvement there, and I don't think that he was just a taxing jungler, but like it's somewhere in the middle, right?
Kelsey, is the implication also, though, that people, for example, like did Korean junglers already do this? Did they understand how to reset part of the wave when their mid laner backs and make sure it still pushes on? Did your beloved Clearlove, was he doing that over in EDG?
I think, like, in obviously season 3, Clearlove was on WE, but I think that it's like there was definitely probably some of it, but as like someone who was at the time didn't really understand the mechanic, I would have to go back and watch a lot more of the VODs to like get a big picture of like who was doing what at the time, all the time, and who was like doing this. But for example, like I watched season 4, Samsung Blue versus Cloud9 today. And I noticed that Spirit is basically the jungler people accuse Meteos of being. He was generally top with Acorn like a lot in terms of making sure that he had those waves and things like that. Whereas I felt like Meteos had a better understanding in season 4 of timing windows to execute ganks and things of that nature. Regarding the point about you think, I just wanted to ask Croissant for a clarification point on, do you think that if like your top laner burns flash 1v1 or something, that it's the jungler's responsibility to get him back in the game then, or?
I absolutely don't think it is the responsibility, but I just know that it's kind of like solo queue where if my top laner flames me for not ganking in the window of 350 to like 405, it's not my fault, right? But I do think about, is that something that I could have done? Could I have been there? And even though, I might have been able to get like this 4% advantage with 100% certainty by taking this pathing. But if I was here at this spot in this tri-brush, in this tri-brush, there's a chance that, I fall behind the enemy jungler by 1%. But if this play happens and if I expect their enemy top laner to show this amount of aggression and this opening shows itself, then I've just secured like a, 10% advantage for me and my top laner. I think those kinds of decisions are ones that Meteos is generally averse to, and he's like much more about optimizing, at least, from solo queue, from streams, and from like these early season his early season play styles. But over the years, he's definitely done less of that, and like it's more of a team decision to, where the jungler goes. Whereas I think in earlier seasons, that was more of Meteos' call.
Okay. Do you have a response to that, Kelsey?
I think it's an interesting conversation to bring up, because I feel like if you're relying on the top laner to misplay, I guess, and you want to be in position in your pathing for the enemy top laner to be over aggressive, then I feel like that's something you're basically relying on the enemy team at that point to be bad. So whereas you could get like the two camps and be ahead and make this play on top side in your own favor, if your top laner is able to like maintain semblance in lane, if you have priority in a specific lane, you want to be able to pathing to a certain lane, you're taking advantage of your own lane's ability to go aggressive when you're on that side of the map and taking enemy camps at the same time. Whereas the enemy laners are kind of like slowly losing their advantages as well, just by you being on the right side of the map. I would say is a big difference. I would say you can criticize Meteos for, at certain parts of his career, not coordinating well with his lanes when he's on the correct side, in the sense that like they're not responding to his presence, or like for the enemy mid laner is like his mid laner is not using fake pressure to get to that side of the map. There's no like sense of threat going on the enemy team, but I don't necessarily think like his pathing decisions in and of themselves are at fault.
Okay. What about this then, Kelsey? So obviously part of the problem with the whole narrative around Meteos anyway is it's absolutely not true, in as much as even if it existed for one split, because after that, as soon as you come into season 4, you basically couldn't play the champions you played before anyway. There was no Zac, no Nasus, etc. in the jungle, and beyond that, he himself actually adapted to playing these champions that people now think of as the ganking champions that you did in season 4, and was actually pretty good doing so. Like seemed like he did switch up his style. Do you follow that narrative as well?
Yep, I think that he did, like, he played a similar style on different types of champions. Like, so I think maybe the point where I disagree with Croissant is that he's saying that, like, this form of optimization and pathing is in certain metas not correct. Whereas I feel like playing to optimize like your advantage and playing in coordination with your lane to control the map is just correct jungling, period. And I don't think of it as a style, so to speak.
Let me ask you this question then. Okay, when you say that, and this point you picked up on Croissant there, okay, this sounds like you basically think Meteos plays the most efficient style. Like generally you should try to get as much farm and as many of the opposing camps as you can, and then only go for ganks that make logical sense. Like they're not relying on, for example, some laner just being overly aggressive against your laner, and therefore you can just walk in and get a free gank onto him. So when you say that, how is that different fundamentally as a principle, presumably to do with the jungle role, from when someone would criticize someone like a Froggen, someone who's famously, they maximize farm in their lane? Like they will actually say, okay, I could roam to this other lane and maybe try and do something, but if I could stay in my lane and get the 15 CS extra, then why wouldn't I do that? What would you say to that? How is the jungle role different in that respect?
So I think the difference here is that what you're doing when there aren't camps up, when there isn't a wave present. Like, for example, like using the Froggen example, Froggen will have a wave like ahead, or he'll be pushing the wave into enemy turret, and so he'll have priority there, and he could maybe like go to the side of the lane and at least get fake pressure. So like the enemy bot lane has to back off because he's in fog of war and they think he's going bot, and then he could go back mid and get camp for that. But he doesn't necessarily always like have a sense that he should be doing this, or he doesn't always coordinate with his jungle to go on invades when he has priority, so they're not like pressing the advantage that they have. Whereas I think the big distinction should not be like, is Meteos, the big question that we should ask in assessing Meteos should not be like, should he give up these camps here? It should be when he's cleared, or when he's like has proper tempo and he can't lose camp, or for example, he can't lose a camp by being on the other side of the map. Like, what is he doing with the advantages that he have? And I think that that's the better question to ask. It's also the better question to ask when you're talking about mid laners like Froggen or Jensen. I guess in season 6, you could levy some of the same like typical arguments that people levied against Froggen against Jensen, and ask these questions like, how are they using their lead and when they cannot be punished. So when they have so much tempo that the enemy team cannot punish them, are they doing something with it?
Okay. Right, so to wrap up the individual part on Meteos, what about the latter days of Meteos then? Because the two eras I just described, so end of Season 3, and then I would say all of Season 4, to be fair, is the other period. Like, these are the different periods where I think it's not even debatable. He absolutely was one of the best Western junglers, probably in contention for best, depending on what criteria you picked. Clearly, his teams had fantastic amounts of success. They were very good teams. They really did almost win like 3 splits back to back to back. So amazing stuff. They were even got good internationally at that point in time. But you come to Season 5 and early Season 6, and this is where, right, when you said before, like the meme or the narrative around Meteos, that's like meme in the traditional sense. It's just an idea that's correlated around him as a person. The memes around Meteos, as in the jokes that people make on the internet, all come from the end of Season 5, where literally they just kicked him out of the team to bring Hai, who wasn't at that point in time a viable jungler, because they were having such problems with him. And then obviously when he came back again and played in the team was when people will remember they went to Worlds with him, and it looked pretty terrible, at least. And people will remember some of his games that were like pretty fucking bad, basically, like where it looked like he inted in some of the games, and he just, for whatever reason, it didn't work as well. So what would you address on this era when people have a lot of criticisms and those actually stick in people's minds very strongly as well still?
So you mean like the Season 6 when he went to Worlds? Yes. With Jensen? Yeah.
Yes.
So I went back and I watched some of those games, and there was a lot of stuff that I think Meteos did really well. But I think that, again, the criticism that you levy here is in the jungle and mid lane are coordinating, the jungle and the lanes coordinating. Like, for example, in the first game against, in a lot of the games against Samsung, Cloud9 were able to get like some good individual leads, and I think a lot of that came down to Meteos' pathing. Like, he would prioritize the Raptors. This was when you still got like the vision from getting the Raptors and smiting the Raptors, and then he went to his blue side because he knew that there was an opening to invade there. So he prioritized getting the Raptors. He immediately makes sure that he secures his blue buff so he doesn't get invaded on and denied. And then since Ambition was headed towards his blue, he wastes Ambition time. He goes back top and he does his clear this way. And then on his reset, a little bit later, he's ulting because he's aware of an invade happening. He's very efficient with his wards. He ends up being able to waste Ambition's time a lot. So like in terms of the individual jungle matchup and the pathing he was doing, it tended to be really smart. But if you look at some of the stuff that what is happening at mid lane, it's like, okay, could he have coordinated with Jensen more here? Could they have gone to side lane? Could they have like invaded jungle together and managed to win some of these 2v2s or 2v3s and then had some more pressure there? Then yeah, I think you can make that argument. But I see that more of as a flaw of Cloud9's team play rather than like looking at jungling. And that's why I think it's really, really difficult to criticize junglers and to separate them from their teams a lot of times. So when I'm talking about jungling in and of itself, it's like, okay, is this guy where he's supposed to be, at least in terms of the pathing, in terms of the position he's at on his map? Is he like ganking at the right times when the wave is in the right position? Things like that. So that's the stuff I think Meteos does really well as a jungler, and saying like, this guy doesn't gank enough is a bit of a weird thing, because that should be like a principle of communication with laners.
Croissant, what do you think of this particular era I'm talking about, like the end of his time in Cloud9, basically, where, as I said, it to some degree built like a notoriety about people thinking he was a bad jungler, and obviously Cloud9 themselves even got rid of him.
So yeah, a lot of that came from his synergy with Jensen. Don't know what the team discussions were like there, but the community felt like Jensen would get leads on his own, just be a strong presence in the mid lane, but they couldn't really confer a lot of those advantages later on in the game. I think part of, so the biggest meme that Meteos faced was, it took him 60 minutes to learn how to play Lee Sin, but he's good at Lee Sin mechanically. He, or at least historically, that's just been one of his top champs alongside Elise and Kha'Zix. Zach was something in Season 3, but it wasn't seen that much in Seasons 4 or 5. And I think the thing that I really, really view Meteos as being weak at is his unpredictability. And what that, the reason they eventually, Cloud9 eventually won that game against Flash Wolves was because Meteos, was playing Lee Sin, got behind Flash Wolves and managed to insect or somehow kick the AD carry into the rest of his team. And they just weren't expecting that, right? And those kinds of I do agree with Kelsey that optimization is good jungling. I think I did make that point very clear, and I'm willing to say that. But the problem with optimization or being somewhere at the right time is if you are playing with this amount of information, the other team knows where you should be at the right time, then how are you getting leads for your team in situations where you need to be playing this first 1 to 6 levels or first 10 minutes in a way that the enemy team doesn't expect? And you see this from like Korean teams all the time. The pathing changes, and I think Meteos's pathing is never creative enough for me, and the criticism should be about that kind of creativity and not because he any of these other narratives that we've already talked about. And I think part of that, the two main points of does he synergize well with his mid laner? Is he looking to make these plays on the mid lane and then roaming bot with Ryu or with Jensen? That extends not only from season 6, but also towards season 7 and 8. Because since he played with Jensen and Hai, I don't think he's played with any mid laners other than Ryu. Just with Ryu on Phoenix 1 and again with Ryu on 100 Thieves. And so I really looked at, when you think about that era, there's not that much data points on Meteos in between that era and his current era. And if you look at his current era, I think a lot of those problems are still the same with Meteos. And a lot of that gets exposed because, one thing that was interesting was Meteos has had a ton of first place regular split finishes. I don't think Xmithie has ever finished once in the regular season first. But how many times does Xmithie, bring his best of 5 series prep and then just really take over his early pathing? Like if you look at Liquid's series in quarterfinals, semifinals, finals, I think he was the best jungler clearly every single time. And I think there were big flaws in Meteos' pathing in the semi and in 100 Thieves semis and their finals. And part of that has to do with the things I just talked about.
Okay. Right, so, can you address the bigger point first, Kelsey? And we'll get to the rest afterwards. We'll just do a little bit after. Go on then.
So I think that the thing about Meteos is that about the optimization and creativity that you mentioned is that it's like you can be really creative and optimal. Like I don't think being creative means doing the incorrect play or the surprise play or the cheese play all the time. I think like being creative finds like ways to find openings regardless of the situation. And I think, for example, like you can highlight very easily a point where he was creative in the final where he was on Sejuani and he actually gets tempo versus Skarner that should have much faster clear against him in the third game where he ends up like doing the clear and getting priority going to Krugs first, and then like his pathing is not clear. He doesn't necessarily cross any wards. He has a different setup, like he's able to back and go bot on that situation. So I think that like that type of thing is creative. I think it's also optimal because it allows him to get ahead of a champion that should have tempo on him. And then the other thing is that if you're playing correctly or in a correct play, then let's put it this way. If both teams have drafted a certain way, unless like one team is just like garbage at drafting, you shouldn't have to make like a suboptimal play if you're playing to get an advantage. You shouldn't have to make like a surprising play to get an advantage, because if you're playing, like say you have strong top, weak bot or something like this, and you're playing to your top side, then if they want to answer that, they can't like answer it head on because they'll lose that, right? So like being predictable in a sense doesn't really matter as long as you're playing to your advantages, as long as you're getting like the better trades.
Do you have anything to say to that, Croissant?
I mean, I agree that there have been instances in which I don't think Meteos, has played all these seasons without being able to optimize and also find openings that the other team doesn't expect. But I just don't see. I see him get these little advantages, and then I don't see them be fully translated to the level that they can be. Right? He gets a slight tempo. He gets some tempo on Skarner, but what does he actually turn that into in this game 3 for 100 Thieves against Liquid? How do they, they go to pressure Maokai in the top side, I remember, but Xmithie ends up being there, counters it, someday misplays it a little bit, but at the same time, Meteos, one thing that I think when I reviewed the series that Meteos was heavily criticized for, and I think even St. Vicious also criticized him for this, is that he does end up going for the Krugs at like level 4, whereas if he went Raptors, Wolves, and then just straight top, Ryu goes up to gank some days on Gnar, Ryu's on Rise, and then Impact's on Maokai, right? And there's like a 2-level disadvantage in the top side, and Ryu gets there, goes for the dive because he shoves in Popelter, and Meteos doesn't arrive for like 10 seconds or so. And the point is, if Meteos is here and he is ahead of Skarner, but it doesn't matter because he's not in this lane really capitalizing on it. But every player there's just so many different examples of this. And Xmithie also made like a bunch of mistakes throughout where he is just over aggressive in the quarters, in the semis, and in the finals. He would have like these random deaths, we would call it, at least once every 1 or 2 games. But yeah, I don't have too much more to say about this topic.
Right, well, let's talk a little bit about... Okay, sorry.
I just wanted to address this path because I have heard a lot of people criticize it. And I think that when you go and you watch this, the reason why they had the opportunity to make this play is because of the back from the enemy mid laner. So Ryu gets priority and goes top. I think that he isn't aware that the mid laner is going to make this bad back when he initially goes back and starts his Krugs. Like he isn't initially aware of that. So going back, if he like skips his camps, he ends up having kind of a non-optimal pathing situation where will have like both sides of his jungle up, and he will theoretically be bad. Also, if you don't take those camps, he doesn't take wolves. He just takes Krugs and he takes Raptors. If he doesn't take Krugs and Raptors, he's not going to be level 6 in the top lane. So that's the other issue with that I've had. I actually have no problem with him doing that route. I just think that they mistimed the coordination of the play in general. I think it was good for Ryu to take advantage of it, but like they go super aggressive and super hard on it. Also, like the only reason why they have this advantage, like these 2-level advantage anyway, is because Meteos has already been up there. And then they end up pushing this advantage all the way to like 2nd tier turret, but they aren't like able to like the team itself is not able to coordinate and continue pushing this advantage. They don't get the vision down. They don't get anything like that. So I agree. But like in terms of early pathing and early setups, I feel like Meteos got the better on Xmithie in 2 games. The only game. I cut off?
Well, maybe it was me cutting off. Okay. I don't know if Thorin could hear you.
I think I heard it. What did you miss?
Yeah.
I just missed like the last 2 seconds, but it's okay.
The only game where he didn't get an advantage, and this is where like I fully admit, I think Meteos actually sucks when the team decides they want to do a level 1 invade or a level 1 cheese. Like he actually, almost all of the times where I've seen him do this, it has backfired. Like he is bad at that. I would say that this is like one of the big distinctions between him and Xmithie is like, I don't know, I feel like Xmithie plans all of his pathing and almost all of his jungling off of like executing level 1 cheeses sometimes. Like he's really going to try to do this style. But like my favorite, one of my favorite games is probably when between the two of them was the Phoenix 1 CLG, when Meteos first comes to CLG in spring, or excuse me, P1 in spring. And then like Meteos does this weird cheese with the bot lane, and he ends up taking the red buff and the Krugs. And then because his bot lane was leashing that for him, they had to take this weird path back to lane. So he ends up getting caught out trying to go to his blue, and Xmithie takes his blue. But then what he does is he immediately like farms Krugs. He farms Xmithie's Krugs, he starts farming both raptors, and then he's like has an advantage on them and sets up a camp and kills Xmithie in the river. So like I think to me that characterizes kind of the perfect difference between these two junglers.
Right, what we'll do now is let's talk a bit about Xmithie, because the key part is you have to remember a lot of people watching now didn't watch in season 3, so they're not going to know who these people are historically. Also, you need to put them in context, and hopefully in doing so, as we just did there, people sort of give their definition of what the person was like, and then that way, hopefully then when we discuss or debate or argue, it's in good faith. People actually have defined what they thought of the player. They're not just trying to win out every point. So, Croissant, do a similar setup for me here. Like, what's the early Xmithie like? Because that's one of the things that a lot of people who watch now, you have to remember, a lot of fans won't even have been there until he joined CLG. So they won't know who the Vulcan Xmithie is, for example. So who is Xmithie in the early days? Xmithie
in the early days was, and he played a lot of TSM invitationals and all that stuff, but he was never... He went through a lot of these different mini rosters, competing at these small tournaments with like $1,000 prize pools, and eventually he finds the squad with Psycho Sid, Zuna probably was there early on in Vulcan, and then ManCloud, and Bloodwater probably was here as well. And then surprisingly, I didn't actually remember this until I looked back at it. I thought Vulcan was strong right from the start, but they do pretty poorly. They don't even make top 5. And this is with 8 teams in the NALCS in 2013 in the spring. And then, I don't know what happens between spring and summer, but Vulcan comes rushing out. And Cloud9 enters, right? And this is when they
what do you mean? In spring split, they finished 3rd, mate?
No. I think in summer they finished.
No, in spring they finished 3rd because they beat Curse. They beat CLG first, and then they beat Curse. I think you misremember it. It doesn't really matter, but just to put the information out there.
No,
they had a slow start, but they finished pretty well, I think.
Cloud9 came in.
Talking about season 3 spring.
Yeah, season 3 spring.
Season 3 spring. Xmithie played for Vulcan. Yes.
Yeah, and Vulcan doesn't start doing well until. C9
I'll look it up right now,
league.
but I guarantee that.
He's talking about regular season. They finished 5th.
Oh, you mean in the split, the regular part of the split?
They finished 3rd in the playoffs, but they finished 5th in the regular season. Yeah.
Is that what you mean in the regular split?
Yeah.
You're not including the playoffs there.
I don't actually remember the playoffs in the regular split.
You're right. They finished 5th in the regular split, and then what happened is they played CLG, who was, I assume, the 4th seed, and then they beat them, and then they beat Curse in the 3rd place decider. It's not really relevant, but nice. I'm just checking we're talking about the same thing here. Yeah?
Gotcha.
Okay. Right, keep going anyway.
Yeah, and then in the regular split in the summer, Cloud9 is by far and away, the best team, but Vulcan is the second best team in the regular split.
Yes, far and away, yeah.
And a lot of that was just credited to ManCloud and Xmithie working together, like as the most dangerous mid-jungle duo, even considered more dangerous than High and Meteos. Meteos was just being more efficient with his pathing overall, but people said, look, they have 3 winning lanes, right? Vulcan can't always get that. So Vulcan, if they were going to win, it was going to be through Xmithie and ManCloud. Then Worlds happens, TSM gets shit on, Cloud9 gets shit on. Vulcan doesn't do terribly well, but they're the only team to take a game off of Fnatic in group stage. Fnatic goes like 7-1 against Korean teams and all that before they go to the quarterfinals against C9. But ultimately, Vulcan ends up with the best percentage record, although that's misleading because Cloud9 only got to play those 3 games. They went 1-2. And then after that, Vulcan just goes into the dirt. There are a lot of management issues, right? People complaining about Zuna bringing his brother in. Zuna leaves the scene. And I think Xmithie spends time in the Challenger Series.
You missed the best part, where Xmithie is actually not jungling, and Zuna is. But yeah, keep going.
Oh my god, does Xmithie just drop out into
AD carry?
Nice, yeah. Good times. Yeah.
Until the very end, and then they tried to reverse it, and obviously you can't just put the fucking genie back in the bottle, can you? So it didn't work, and they got relegated.
Yep. And then they try to make it back in the promotion series, and I think they get stomped by
He was basically, after
Fear.
that, no exaggeration, he was completely in the wilderness. It's one of the most ridiculous examples I've ever seen of a player legit just being gone for years and then being brought back, obviously to play in CLG, but in a scenario where, I mean, people forget this, when he was brought back even in CLG, even all the people who, like, you know, knew the name value, a lot of them were like, but is this guy any good? Because that's one of the things I've noticed, actually. This is an area where Riot's idea of Challenger actually backfired massively, which is, for me, I have to say, I put almost no stock in Challenger results because I don't see any actual translation. Like, they don't mean anything. Like, it's not like someone who does really well in Challenger then does well in LCS. Nah, it's very hit and miss, actually. And in fact, you have people, Golden Glue's obviously a great example, who look great every single Challenger they play in, and then every LCS, they're back to being nobody again. And so, in this case, people like it happened to ManCloud as well. If you then don't smash Challenger, you are literally now written off forever as you cannot be good. Whereas actually, if you think about it, there's a lot of factors in Challenger that have nothing to do with pro play. You're not under pressure. You are just playing random online matches. You're playing against teams that aren't proper teams. You know, it's a million factors that have nothing to do with pro play. Anyway, that was a rant, but you just bring it back. The wilderness period going into CLG.
Yeah, and so unlike Meteos' narrative, a lot of this was not misaligned. It was just Xmithie banished because he wasn't seen as good enough, and CLG brings him in. They get off to a pretty slow start in the spring split. But then summer comes around, and again, CLG doesn't finish first in playoffs, but I think they don't finish first in the regular split, but then they come out and they 3-0 in the semis and then 3-0 TSM in the finals. And this is when Xmithie starts to be called one of the most underrated junglers in North America. Season 6, even though Double Lift leaves, Pobelter leaves, and he's playing with Huki and Stixay, CLG does pretty well at some IEM events.
MSI.
Yeah. No, they did their first time they played together, I think, was at IEM San Jose or something, with that new roster. Yeah.
Right, yes. Okay.
Yeah. And then they, take the spring cleanly. Well, I think it was a 3-2 series against TSM or something like that.
Yeah.
And then, they perform at MSI, arguably the best North American finish.
Right, this is all great, but this is just this is history right now. I want to know about Xmithie the jungler, though. Give me that perspective on it.
And so Xmithie, throughout all this time, he's just the Gragas god. He got memed on for his Sejuani play and missing R by Monte Cristo right around 3 years ago. It seems like forever ago, but it's just 3 years ago in season 5. And this was in the spring of before they were successful in the summer, and they got that first place finish. But throughout this time, Xmithie is seen as a Sightstone jungler player, and it's like the meta is good for him. He just plays tanks and stuff. Whereas Meteos, who succeeded on Kha'Zix, Lee Sin, Elise, those champions aren't popular anymore. And so Xmithie just plays through season 5, season 6 on these two different teams. As a jungler, he just sets a vision for his team, does like normal routes. No one sees him as like someone exceptional, not a Dardoch player who just goes in and takes over the game by himself and solo carries, right? But come season 7, he's seen as like a liability again for CLG, so they swap him to Immortals, and he starts to control vision again, be praised for his pathing and just his setup of his laners. And then season 8, he switches to Liquid, and same story, except now I think some people probably predicted that he would drop off in value now that Tracker's Knife was removed, but he does fine with the red and blue smites, and is a team fighter, but also gets these early advantages and does these full clears optimization, gets level advantages on Skarner, and just that's about his history for me as a jungler. I don't think he went through any huge playstyle shifts, but what was striking to me was just how he adapted through these different metas and through he never like switched to like Lee Sin and became really proficient on that champion, but he's just always been consistent on Gragas, Sejuani, and the split he picked up Trundle, Skarner, and everything meta that his team needed him to play. So seems like an excellent role player and just like a good team presence.
What do you think then, Kelsey? What's your thoughts on Xmithie?
I think that it's not a coincidence to me that we saw Xmithie kind of like, I think of Xmithie at his peak in summer 2017. You might disagree, but it was during the kind of the catch-up experience jungle phase where you could get a lot out of like giving up a camp, right, and then going to a lane and ganking it. And then even if you lose this camp to an invade or something like this, then you can like get more from the respawn of the camp and catch up in that sense. So I think that for me, like Xmithie looks to try to force a lot of opportunities that aren't always going to be the best. Like in the final, when Xmithie kept going top and didn't necessarily get ganks off of it and then could lose camps for it. I think Team Liquid as a whole like tend to give up a lot of farm on one side just to go to the other and like try to really, really force like these 5v5s to an extent. And that's part of the issue why I think their early game is only so-so. And I think the thing about Xmithie is that he seems to put a lot of thought and a lot of attention into, and this could be like a CLG thing, because I feel like CLG also still have this quality, into how he's going to do his first path or his first setup, or how he's going to, where he's going to start in particular. It's like, okay, am I going to start enemy red buff or something like this? And he's much more open to those types of alternative starts than I think a lot of junglers. But after that, he ends up being kind of like safe in his pathing. He'll do 3 camps and look for a gank over and over again. So for me, I think that that's like Xmithie is like the hard starter in the early game, and then kind of ends up just sort of being safe after that and dutiful and does what his team does. And even though he was memed for like the Sejuani thing in previous seasons, like I think now his engages on champions like Sejuani are one of his best qualities in terms of team fighting and just like playing later on in the game as well. So.
Right, Croissant, I've got a question for you. Okay, so you said that to you, he hadn't really gone through any sort of like drastic play style change or whatever. But the funny thing is, I remember when he came up in Vulcan, everyone raved about him as if he was the guy who was, the main term everyone used was mechanical jungler. People will remember that infamous desk segment where Doublelift at Worlds said that Dandy was Xmithie light. By the way, since you guys
still don't understand what he meant by that at all, by the way. Like, there's zero comparison in my mind, but yeah.
Don't worry. What's even better is that Doublelift to this day maintains it was accurate because the team didn't do well at that Worlds. Like, that's how ridiculous that statement. I like to just throw that one out there for all the people who tell me that like Doublelift has a great mind for the game. Like, he has great fingers, really fucking amazing fingers. So anyway, Croissant, what was this just a misconception? Why did people essentially in the first period rave about him as mechanical, and then in the latter days, as you're saying, people think of him as a site-stone jungler, right? His job is he sets up vision, he works with a team, he tries to help a team succeed. He's not going to himself get 9 kills or take over a game or do sick outplays, is he? I mean, you're not going to do some fucking mad outplay on Sejuani, are you?
Yeah, I don't fully remember his champion pool in Season 3, but I think he was perceived as the mechanical jungler because he probably played Elise and stuff like that, and just, you know, really went hard on the 2v2s with ManCloud. And so there's a lot of individual outplays that you have on the enemy jungler, on the enemy mid laner. But again, Season 4, where he just had a huge dip in performance, his team wasn't working out. His Lee Sin had a 1 KDA, was his most placed jungler, 5 played, 0% win rate, you know, that kind of stuff. His Elise was still pretty good, but this is when you had Spirit of the Lizard Elder or something, just like those burn items that got abused by Ezreal and that kind of stuff. But after he comes back with CLG, he's never the same again. He just mastered Gragas or something, I guess. He just really, really went hard. And this is what CLG probably wanted from him as a jungler, right? He learned how to play the style with Ziggs and the rest of CLG, double lift on the carries, Zion also on carries pretty often. And that continued just throughout season 6 and 7 and 8. And I guess he feels really comfortable on that now. And teams aren't trying to make him learn, I don't know, like when he's tried to learn Graves and other champions, it just hasn't gone super well for him and his team. So I think part of that is actually, I made a mistake by saying that his playstyle hasn't changed. I think he's gotten much better at pulling the trigger in mid to late game team fight situations. I just never had noticed it before, but like you can't make that kind of stick engage on a Graves, but he'll just posture on Skarner or something. And Skarner, the thing about these tanks is people don't really see that much outplay potential other than running up and flash ulting someone. But it's how you move and like those little micro movements, and he kind of fakes out enemy AD carries and mid laners and don't expect him to just go all in when he does at like 20 minutes, right? But a lot of that backfires in his early game pathing when it'll just be 8 minutes and he'll just beeline for someone and then his team will die. And that happened 2 or 3 times for Liquid throughout playoffs, in which it was unacceptable. But I think his play style has remained pretty consistent over these last few years. And it's more about, it's nice because he has this consistent play style, but he changes, as Kelsey said, his early level 1 starts, his early plan, and he communicates this to his team really effectively. And he doesn't always play around like mid or only top or only bot. He switches around based off of the team preparation and the team they're playing against. And so that's a really nice piece in the puzzle to have, and it makes sense why he's worked in all these different teams.
I also think it's interesting that you brought up the season 3 section, because I feel like Elise at that point was just like so broken. I remember when she debuted, it was like a flex pick between him and Psycho Sid, like top and jungle and shit like this. But I always associate him in that period with the Vi, which I don't think anyone would call like a super highly mechanical champion. It was just like he didn't hesitate when he pulled the trigger on the engages, which I think is again something that has been consistent with him. It's become like more defined and more developed over time, but that was always like, if you have an R button on Vi and you know when to go in, you're going to look good. It's not really a mechanical thing. So
yeah.
Right, let's just open the floodgates then. So let's start here. Croissant, make the case. Why is Xmithie the best jungler, specifically over Meteos?
So I think he's the best jungler in North America.
By the way, here's a very simple way we'll do this, okay? Because after listening to both of you, I already realised I fucked up my jungle pathing with the way I set up this show. Right, here's how we're going to do this part of the segment, okay? I'm going to get this shit under control. We're going to do this. You're going to make 1 point. So in this case, make a point either against Meteos or for Xmithie, and then Kelsey will respond to that point. And in doing so, may bring up a point of her own, but she will respond to that point. And we can have some back and forth, but just initially make a point for me. Either make a point for Xmithie being the best, or perhaps a reason against Meteos. One of them. Pick one for now. There will be other opportunities.
I'll make a point. Well, it's like for Xmithie and against Meteos at the same time.
Let's do it. Okay.
Xmithie is just a more clutch player.
What does that mean?
I think that means come playoffs time, what kinds of decisions is he making with his team, and how strong is his mental? Right.
Okay.
Those are all things that
perhaps
come
give
clutch.
like an example or an extra detail for one or the other, like perhaps where you thought Meteos isn't clutch enough, or where Xmithie's shown this, and then Kelsey will have grounds to respond.
I see even when Xmithie falls behind, he's always looking to make things happen. And he's like communicating this to his team, and he goes for certain plays and they end up working out, right? Liquid was behind in almost every game against Cloud9, but through their veteran power from Impact and Xmithie, right? I think those, like, I think that's kind of ridiculous because, you have a ton of veterans on Meteos' side. Meteos is a veteran, Ryu someday, and there just seemed to be a lot more hesitation, and Meteos never seems never made many primary engages on 100 Thieves side that I was really impressed by. So I just think that it is telling that Xmithie has gone through all these different iterations of these teams and made it to finals, whereas most of Meteos' finals appearances, or all of them except this most recent one, were with Cloud9.
Okay, right, there we go, Kelsey. Response?
Right, so all of Xmithie's appeared in finals with Immortals, CLG, and Team Liquid. Okay,
yeah.
And then Vulcan. So Meteos has appeared in finals with Cloud9 and
Meteos has been in the most
Thieves.
finals, by the way.
Yeah, he's been in the most finals of the two, but he's also been on two teams. So I don't know if 2 versus 4 is this big thing that you have to P1 is kind of a joke if we talk about what happened to P1, and I do think that his consistency, or that their consistency in terms of what jungle they wanted to play, I don't even necessarily consider Meteos the primary P1 jungle, so it's a little bit weird.
I feel like we're getting sidetracked here. The point was Meteos is not as clutch in the playoffs, and then he gave the side
part of my
reason.
rebuttal.
Okay.
Yeah. But I think Meteos not being clutch is just it's a weird thing. I do agree that Xmithie's sense for engage is better. But to use one of Thorin's all-time favorite Kelsey quotes, you can be a good jungler, or you can be a good player and not a good jungler, right? Used to describe Clear Love at the time. Whereas I feel like Xmithie's team fighting is not necessarily relevant to his jungling. So if we're setting up the idea of who is the best jungler, then I think that Meteos wins that. Because I also think Meteos is clutch in the sense that if something goes wrong in those weird level ones, he always finds a way to get back in. And it's not necessarily the same as he's always trying to force something, but he'll prioritize certain camps that he wants to farm, like the heavy Krugs camp, the heavy Raptors camp with all these extra creeps, and he'll take those from his enemy jungler over and over again, and he'll make sure he gets back in the game, and he'll make sure that he sets up a play in river that snowballs into dragon control, or that he'll make sure he'll set up bot so that bot can pressure mid or something of that nature while he's farming. So I think that he's just very efficient, and he's very good at reacting. So I feel if you're a good reactive player, then I don't understand how you can't be clutch, which by the way is one of the biggest memes to describe a player ever. But we'll keep going on this premise anyway.
Response, Croissant? Do you have any rebuttal to that?
Can you repeat?
If you can't...
No.
Okay, yeah?
Can you
I was just going to
repeat
give you a
the
piece of strategic advice here, which is if you don't have a good response, it's better to just make your own other point, or move the topic on, or let her make a point. You can, I know people don't realize this, but it's generally better to just talk about things you really know about.
Yeah.
What were you going to say? You had something? What
I was going to say that
what she said.
I think it was interesting that I just disagree that, you can be a good player. Okay, I can see what you're saying about you can be a good player but not a good jungler. But I think in this discussion and the way that it's laid out, right? We've talked about the history of these players, what teams they've been on, what their champion pools, and I think for you to focus primarily on just this pathing and Meteos' ability to adapt and react, and that's what makes him a good jungler. Okay, I'm totally fine giving Meteos the best reactive pathing award of the NALCS, but I think that, when Thorin asked me first on Twitter, who do I think is the best jungler? I think about their role, not just in the first 10 minutes of the game, but how they've led these different teams to these different successes in North America, right? Their pedigree. And I'm again, I said at the beginning that I think it's impressive that Meteos came back after his streaming, detour, because the only people who've been able to really do that have been Doublelift and Meteos, right? I Will Dominate, Cutie Pie, they're just out. But you look at someone like Xmithie, and I find a different kind of resilience and growth from him in that he went through that period where he was just, relegated, right? Meteos never really went through that. Whenever C9 was, or when C9 was doing badly, he was just out, and then High comes in, or Contracts comes in, not because Meteos is terrible, but he's just like so-so. And I think the fact that Xmithie brought his team, or brought his different teams, and not just the fact that he was on CLG, but the fact that he succeeded on CLG with a new AD carry and mid laner and these like rookie players, all of that speaks to the maybe meme and not very substantive analysis, but just I place a lot of stock in good teammate, right? Good team presence. I don't think it's an accident, and I think that Xmithie has had such a huge impact on his teammates and the North American scene that I can't put anyone else as the best NA jungler other than him.
So, I mean,
what a ridiculous person, right? Go on then.
I just mean, so how do you have information on like the intangibles that Xmithie versus Meteos provides, I guess would be my question.
It's really, again, this, I feel like if you just take one interview and you say, oh, this teammate said this good thing about Xmithie or about Meteos, that's ridiculous, right? But I don't think it's ridiculous to take the stock and the opinions of people on their teammates that and not even teammates, but people they played against for 3-4 years, and just having that massive information and making judgments about, okay, what kind of team player is Xmithie, what kind of team player is Meteos, and the impression that you really do form about these two players from like what their teammates say about them is Meteos is a chill guy who communicates, and he's very passionate about the game, and he's willing to have a discussion about something. But that discussion is a lot of, it seems reactive. It seems a lot of questions like, oh, what should we have done differently here? Where I feel like Xmithie has ideas. I feel like Xmithie, he's been, when Double Lift and when Pobelter and all these teammates say that they really, and Ole say that they really respect Xmithie, it's not because Xmithie is a nice, funny person, but because he has ideas about the game and he teaches it to them, and he says, this is what we're going to do. And I think that each of these players, each of his teammates grow alongside Xmithie, whereas I don't see Meteos, like the time that Meteos has spent with Ryu and Someday and the mistakes that they're making on 100 Thieves still, even with like the guidance and leadership of Aframu, they're not improving at a rate that I think is indicative of I feel like Xmithie has more of an impact on his team, and that shows in like a lot of these results.
So we're giving the award to the jungler who has the best press then?
No, not the best press. I mean, I can't.
I mean, it's just like really hard to rate a jungler on this type of situation, because it's like I'm not in the room with these teams when they're discussing the game. I'm not in the room with, so like I try to avoid those types of discussions of like what a player brings, unless like I know personally or I've interacted with that player personally and their team personally. So for me, it's like a bit difficult because you even go back to season 3 and you listen to stuff that like Hai said about like Meteos basically taught him like this and this about mid or whatever. And so like you can bring back little tiny snippets of like things players have said favorably about their teammates, like imparting game knowledge or helping them improve, and like we can have that kind of discussion. But I would rather talk about stuff that like we can make like kind of cold calls about, you know?
I feel like at the same time, I feel like it's too abstract to talk about, oh, this player has good pathing or this player has good, like, because there's so many different, there's hundreds of games to look at from each of these players. And
I've watched a lot of them. Yeah. And I'm sure you have too. So I do think we can like pull up examples, and we can pull up like consistent trends of behaviors and talk about that. So I think that's fair.
How about this? Kelsey, you make a point now, either against Xmithie or in favor of Meteos.
Sure. I think, okay. So for me, there are certain things that I feel like Xmithie does very well that make him kind of like creative or interesting in terms of his first pathing. But one thing that I would say about Xmithie is after a point, like you notice very predictable trends in what he's doing. Like, for example, I talked about the 3 camp into a gank type of strategy, and I feel like this is the type of start that he wants to make happen a lot, and he wants to get a laner ahead in this way. And so I think that this setup is something that he does a lot, and he often like will waste time doing it if the lane isn't positioned for this. So I think that that's like something that I think Xmithie does, whereas Meteos will not like kind of waste time. He will not do that type of play if it's not in a good position.
What do you think, Croissant?
So this goes back to the point that, do you expect the enemy if you make a play that expects the enemy top laner will make a mistake, is that good play or is it just a bad game plan going in? And I don't like that method of analysis or of looking at these situations, because I think that even this season where you've like people always say that players are constantly improving in League and that, you know, more information, more things are being figured out. But even then you have junglers pathing from bot to top and then looking for something top and then getting a flash out, right? And then we criticize the top laner saying, you know, you should have known that the jungler was going to be there. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that even when players like Xmithie go for these things, Xmithie would go for that kind of play more often than Meteos. And I think that what Xmithie expects is even if he doesn't get a kill, he gets a flash and he gets enough pressure off of his top laner and he threatens coming back, or he can, you know, make his decisions from there on. And in that way, I think that Xmithie enables his team more and is willing to take those lower percentage plays, and I think that's necessary. I think that's something that is just necessary for a jungler. I see more of Xmithie in a lot of LCK junglers than I do Meteos. Like Meteos would be closer to someone like Blank at his peak, right? For me, and I think the criticisms that people have for Blank are just exacerbated by SKT's individual laner problems or like their struggles in this past split. And Meteos,
I'm just confused here. What was the gist of that? Like, summarize what you just said quickly.
Okay, so Kelsey's point was just, you know, Xmithie can be very predictable because will do a 3 camp clear,
sure.
And then just go for a gank or something, and Meteos will stray away from that. And I'm saying that the fact that Xmithie may go for something that's predictable, but still gets all these results, still wins these games, you know, his early
Basically,
game...
it doesn't matter if you're predictable if it's successful.
Yeah, his early game is doing what it has to, and it doesn't succeed every single time because there are ways to play against it. But then Xmithie will just react to that and, you know, do something in the mid game, or he'll just switch it up for game 3 if he got countered in game 2. And he's just so resilient, right? I feel like Meteos avoids those plays because he fucks up once and he's just, oh, okay, what do we do now? And I don't like judging players off of what they do in solo queue or what they do on their stream, because it is really different. But I can see a lot of those like attitudes. And I think if you spend like half of your time or like 30% of your time playing solo queue and the rest scrimming with your team, and you build those habits and those attitudes and perspectives on how to play this kind of game, we'll see. And Meteos' style really is, right, when I play solo queue, I have to do that kind of stuff to succeed. But there's just like a fundamental approach that you can see, and I don't think anyone could disagree that Xmithie and Meteos have different approaches, and I'm saying that I like Xmithie's approach to the game better.
Right, here's what we're going to do. this isn't like Weldon Green and LS double team.
I'm not saying it is.
But
Okay.
I'm going to make it like that, except it's now a triple threat cage match because I'm going to get involved, but I'm going to attack everyone's points. So I will do this, okay, Kelsey? He made his point. He responded to your point. I'd ask this, okay? So when you say that point of like, yeah, but why are you making a play that involves the other person make a mistake? I don't know what games you've been watching, Kelsey, but I watch games played by human beings. And even in the beloved homeland, promised land of Korea, I watch people every single week in LCK lose flash in the most predictable manner where you could see the fucking jungler on the minimap walking all the way up. I watch people go for aggressive, like force the other guy off the CS, even though you just know there's like a 50% chance the jungler's in that brush right there, and then he gets killed in a gank, like totally unnecessary, totally his fault, you know. It doesn't even matter if he told his jungler, I'm going to do it. The jungler could at best only have made it like 1-for-1 or something like that. I see this happen all the time, so I don't really understand why you've just made such a really strict like statement there. Like basically, if I had to summarize like my version of what Croissant's saying, is that he sees Xmithie as being more decisive, he makes things happen more, he makes these plays happen that might seem predictable, that might not be perfectly played against, but they work so often that he is therefore gaining and creating more advantages for his team, especially in the early game, mid-game. Meanwhile, he sees it as Meteos doesn't go for some of these plays, perhaps because in line with you, he thinks, well, it's better to farm here because the enemy laner shouldn't be out of position. But you know what? We aren't in some computer simulation where everyone plays accurately and correctly. People make mistakes all day long. So actually, I would personally say, as a jungler, that you probably should leave room in there for the enemy to fuck up and give you opportunities. That is actually a style of play. It's like you can actually just punish people's mistakes. That will definitely work in every league in the world. What would you say to that?
I think that you have to look at what the jungler is losing, because every decision to make that play. It's because every decision you make comes with something that you could be doing instead, theoretically, right?
Sure.
So if you've drafted yourself into a hole and you have like 3 losing lanes and your team comp doesn't even like have good answers mid to late game to what the enemy team does, then sometimes your only recourse is going to be like, screw it, I'm gonna like level 2 cheese this, because the only way this happens is if like this guy gets monstrously ahead and we have like a 5k gold lead. So then you necessarily have to take a risk there. Right. If you're playing, if both teams have drafted like humans, and you have like good setups and good options on both sides, then let's say like the tempo jungler will generally win because he'll clear faster, he'll get to a point where he can make a play or lay down vision before the other guy. So theoretically, if you're pathing from bot to top and you get like a camp ahead because your jungle champion is faster, you put ward on that side, so enemy jungler gets to top side, like is matching pathing, is 1 camp behind you, tries to force something on top, there is no way your top laner does anything like that. This doesn't require computer simulation or anything like that. It just means that if you know you're not playing a temple jungle, there's a better option that you could be doing, which is like farming better camps, making sure that you get like a better back. You're coming down and you're putting wards on the other side faster. You're making something happen on the other side faster. If you're wasting time doing a top gank that's not going to work out, that very low probability is going to work out, that's not going to be good for you. You have to consider like what you could be doing instead. My criticisms of Xmithie is oftentimes he'll go for ganks when he has a better opportunity, and like maybe he doesn't even get a flash. Maybe he doesn't even reset the wave for his laner, but he just like, this play is not as good as something that he could be doing. Whereas I feel like Meteos will always think like, what is the best play that I could be making in this scenario? And maybe it's just farming and getting vision first. Maybe it's just backing first so that I have wards on the map first. And that helps my laners. And that way, if like they make a mistake and die to the other enemy jungler's gank, it's like, I did my job. What the fuck are you guys doing?
Right, Croissant, when you respond right now, don't respond as though we were 3 friends drinking a hot cocoa, reminiscing on something. Your job is only to attack the parts of what she just said you disagree with and make points in conjunction with it that make Xmithie better than Meteos. Please do not tell me you agree and that Meteos is really good. Like, I don't care about that. Here's the secret of a debate, Croissant. She's making the points for Meteos, mate. You don't have to agree with them. You make the points for Xmithie, she'll make the points for Meteos, and in the middle, we'll all get the success. The overlap will mean that every point gets made. So what would your rebuttal to that be?
My rebuttal is Xmithie was willing to reset level 5, walk past his blue buff to gank the bot side. He's red side and will gank the bot lane. And the bot lane just won't expect it, right? I don't think that Xmithie doesn't think about the game, and Meteos Meteos uniquely says, what can I be doing here differently in terms of, do I want to get vision, or do I want to... I think Xmithie does all of those things, and I'd say he does them even better. I'd say that Xmithie will have occasional fuck-ups, but that comes from the amount of decisions that he's actively making, the amount of choices that he lays out on the table for his team and says, do we do this, do we do this, do we do this? And so he just gives his team more options at all times. And this is my problem with, like, yes, Kelsey and I have both watched many games. I've, watched hundreds of NALCS games. And I do know that there have been times where Meteos out-jungles Xmithie. But if I'm just to narrow those games down to the sample size of finals or just playoff series in the last 2 to 3 years, I think Xmithie has definitely been on an uptick, consistently outperforms enemy junglers, and even when he doesn't, his overall performance in that playoffs series or in a split is better than anything Meteos can really attest to for the last few years. So,
Kelsey, do you have a specific rebuttal to that, or would you rather make a point?
Yeah, I guess first my question would be, like, how do you classify better? Because that's like a very vague term, like his performance has been better. But the way that I would say it is that, okay, when Xmithie is like making the decision to go for this, he's leaving his top side completely open. Like, Meteos can go and farm all of those camps and then come down and make a better play bot or a better play on the other side of the map. So like by having a level advantage or by having this type of advantage, whereas I feel like Xmithie puts him in a position where he'll always have to like kind of sneak around the enemy jungle and be behind and not really be able to take like 2v2s head on in those scenarios. So,
and I think my specific response to that would be, I haven't seen that happen to Xmithie for a really long time, and definitely not the split. Like, he had to jungle against Dardoch in the semis, and we saw the unspeakable things that Dardoch did to Lyra in the third place match. I just saw Xmithie repeatedly outpathing Dardoch, and he went for plays, and Dardoch was never able to just, get Krug's Raptors on the top side, and that Xmithie just gave up. I don't agree that Xmithie will go for these plays that leave the other side of his jungle vulnerable that often, and definitely not in the early game.
He did it a lot in the final against Meteos, and they did get like a lot of top control, and often Meteos would trade like red buff for like him making a bot play. And if like enemy, like my criticism was often like it was on 100 Thieves bot lane to back off, and they get a better trade topside if and 100 Thieves bot lane just backs off when they do that. So I guess for me, it's like TL were like continuously forcing bot or top when like you could predict them doing this, and then 100 Thieves would get a better trade. And so I always felt like those were like kind of the defining differences between these two junglers.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying on that point, because I did see a lot of times where Cody and Afro could just be backing off, but part of that just definitely has to fall on Meteos, right? Like, this is my just general perspective on junglers, but if you are right-clicking a Krug that's not really moving, or a red buff, right? And in solo queue, there's not much you can do other than paying your support or AD carry a few times. But if I'm taking the red buff and I'm just saying, Xmithie and Pobelter could be coming down right now on Skarner Azir, just destroying you guys, especially because your flash is down or something, then you just got to yell at Cody and Afro. If they don't have the awareness themselves, which they should, but if they don't, you have to make sure that they leave. And the fact that that's not happening, the fact that, I don't know, maybe Meteos, again, this goes to things that we don't have information about. how we don't have information or access to their comms, but that has to be happening, and it's not from either the spot lane or from Meteos, and that's just right. Like, it would be all nice and well if I saw this playing out as you said, like Meteos getting these advantages and them just dropping their bot tower. That's okay, but it happens so often where, or it happened very often in the finals where they just were where they were making bad trades across the map. And that's not all on Meteos, but a big part of it is. And I think that Xmithie just, again, doesn't
Croissant,
make those
perhaps
mistakes.
we could reframe this as Xmithie works better with his laners than Meteos does.
Sure.
Would that be fair?
Yeah, but I also don't want to fully concede the point that I think at best Meteos is slightly better at pathing than like Xmithie and about making optimal decisions, but ultimately, yeah, and Xmithie is definitely not perfect. I don't want to make that seem to be my point, but but he is as good as you get in North America. So
okay, right. How about this, Kelsey? Make an actual point in favor of Meteos here.
Okay, I'll make a point in favor of Meteos. I think that in order to defend Meteos a little bit, I think that like when laners are not responding optimally to what's happening, this often like will reflect poorly on the jungler or the mid laner. But I think that often like what happens is communication breaking down across the board. So as a point in favor of Meteos, like even if he calls something, not the enemy team, his own team reacting doesn't necessarily mean he's not calling it, right? And the fact that the other point like in that is that he is observing these situations and he's reacting to them well, or he's seeing those situations in advance and he's moving like on the spot. And maybe the rest of his team also doesn't see these situations or these openings in the same sense that he does. And so that's something that will have to come with time. Whereas I feel like in North America, it's like teams are almost getting rewarded for bad plays because you don't have this type of reactive behavior. Whereas I feel like Meteos is like, someday we will be at a point where we can continue to make these plays and we can make the better trades and we can get the advantages in this way. And like my bot lane is not going to be dying to a group dive bottom, and I'm not going to be an LPL jungler who just like accepts that we have to play 5v5 or someone's going to die and take a disadvantage fight in that situation. Like I think that Meteos is like aware of the correct play, and the fact that he's like determined to keep doing that makes him stand out and makes him look good. And so maybe these types of things are these team communication aspects within his teams are things that he and the rest of them need to work on, but he's not like conceding to, oh, we have to make a cheese happen and I'm going to play unoptimally just because my team can't handle it, you know?
So when you said someday we can blah, 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 did you mean like literally eventually this team will be able to play correctly, or were you talking about someday that, okay, I thought you were saying that Meteos is talking to someday or some shit like that.
No, it's just like maybe one day. Okay.
Yeah, maybe
we'll
one day.
that.
And this is something that I empathize with a lot, right? Like I am in a singing group. That's why I'm flying to New York today. Like we're going to perform on Broadway. But like I have close to perfect pitch. Optimally, I would be singing, exactly an A at 441 hertz. But I just can't, like the rest of the other 15 people in my group, if they can't do that, I need to be flexible and adapt to that. So I just really, really want to push back against this idea that, okay, Meteos is playing optimally and he just has too much pride or doesn't want to, or just it's against his moral code to really adapt to what his team is doing. That still just puts Xmithie as a better player for me.
Right. Kelsey.
Yeah.
Is he being disingenuous there, or did you imply that, like, basically, it does sound a bit like you're having it both ways. Like, on the one hand, Meteos is making, like, all these super efficient decisions and doing it all right. And then if he brings up, like, yeah, but what about this instance here? You're like, well, it wasn't his fault. So, Like, whereas I think what he's trying to say here is like, basically, sometimes maybe you have to imperfectly jungle if you have a team that in this particular moment needs you to play less efficiently.
So let's say you don't have like the nameplates on the bot lane. You don't have like Ezreal is Cody's son or anything like this. And you just have the champions and what those champions should be doing in those situations. I think it's better from a team perspective to try to strive to make the optimal play overall, where then you put like Cody's son on the nameplate or whatever, and like you understand that this guy is struggling to react to calls where, by the way, I'm going top, you should back off because enemy mid has priority and they're going to head bot like 4 and Ryu can't even catch up. So we can't even have like an optimal situation where we're fighting 4v4. So you guys need to just back off. And that's just the way it's going to be. And Cody's son, like, is having trouble reacting to this. Like, what should you do as Meteos in this scenario? Should you make what you believe is the optimal play and still try to get like some advantage by denying topside camps, knowing your AD is going to die? Or should you go bot and try to like pray that your 3v4 is going to somehow like work out for you, knowing that you're going to lose probably because Ryu can't join you? Like, that's the kind of scenario that I think about. And I think that like Meteos making the counter jungling decision is the better decision, even if he knows that his team is not going to react that well to the trade.
No response to that?
Game one, Meteos, game one of this final series in NA, right? Meteos had that thing where he cleared, then he sat in the bot lane brush and waited for double lift and Ole to push up, and then they didn't happen, so he just like recalled or went somewhere else. I mean, junglers always make those kinds of decisions where they just wait for the enemy to fuck up, and sometimes your bot lane is the one that does fuck up, like Cody and Afro. But like Cody got his summoners blown by Xmithie, and then Xmithie came right back bot, and they thought
he's crashed.
Sorry?
You crashed a second minute. Say that again.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, so I think throughout the series there were instances in which Meteos went for something, didn't work. Xmithie went for something, it backfired. But I think that I just can't blame Cody for the things that happen, right? Cody and Afro as a unit decided to stay under that tower. Ryu, Meteos, and Someday were supposed to really fuck Impact up, and Impact stayed under the tower, and he just outplayed, right, their top side, or 100 Thieves top side. So I don't really have that much to respond to this specific point.
Do you have another point then give me another point on behalf of me, either against Meteos or for Xmithie?
So for Xmithie, I was just really impressed by his ability to adapt to champion pool this playoffs, right? He's the person that brought out Trundle first in North America. I don't think that, they didn't use some analytics or any interesting data analysis. They were like, EU played Trundle, we tried playing it, and we didn't see any answers to it ourselves. We couldn't play against it, and no one could beat us on it. So they pulled it out first. That's great. Against 100 Thieves, Meteos pulled out Trundle once, but it just didn't look that great in the semifinal series. And then in the finals, it was a liability because 100 Thieves had to ban it more often than not. They left it open, and Xmithie took over the game on his Trundle, of course, with his team's help. But I think that Xmithie's ability to, I definitely don't see him. I wanted to see people pinch Mythie's jungle pool, but to do that, they'd have to ban out Skarner, Trundle, Sejuani, and probably even like Gragas or something else, right? But he just was really, really performing on those champions in a way that I don't think Meteos looked as good as Xmithie on. The only thing that Meteos had in his advantage was really the Zac pick but Zac just doesn't do well against those other three champs. Oh, Meteos did play Olaf a little bit more often than Xmithie did, but that was just something that, right, Team Liquid worked around. They knew we're going to ban Olaf, and Xmithie is going to be more impactful on these 3 champions in team fights and also in early skirmishes and pathing. So,
like Kelsey, the gist of that, as far as I can tell, was that Xmithie had a better champion pool, adapted more, at least in this exact specific instance. What would you say to that?
I think that the way that 100 Thieves play, they're never going to really like going for the Trundle, and I think going for the Trundle in this particular matchup against TL is bad and doesn't play to where 100 Thieves has an advantage. And the reason why Skarner and Olaf are such good champions for Meteos is because those are the fast, clear tempo jungles in the meta. Those are the jungle picks that are going to clear a camp ahead and be able to get an advantage and abuse the fact that TL's early game, like, they tend to give up a lot on one side to make something happen on the other. 100 Thieves probably identified that, said, we're going to stick to our Skarners and our Olafs, and we're going to fast clear, and we're going to make sure we get better trades in those situations. Obviously, the plan didn't go out, but whenever I see, for example, 100 Thieves not leash for Meteos, I get like insanely tilted in my head, because it's like at that point you're not even using like your best advantage in terms of your early game, or you're not even playing to this, because I feel like 100 Thieves, like their big advantage in regular season was that they understood the concept of a tempo jungle. They understood how to get advantages. Like, I was really impressed with Meteos' Skarner above like so many other Skarners, because he understood that Skarner clears faster. You can put pressure on like Jensen as a mid laner and make sure he doesn't get first back. Your mid laner gets first back. You shut down a lot of Cloud9's early playmaking just by being able to have those clears, being able to be at the play beforehand. I think that like the Trundle hype, a lot of it comes from the fact that people are screwing up tempo, and so that's never going to be a play that like should work that well into 100 Thieves, or that 100 Thieves should pick. But like they didn't execute well, so I think that it's fair to criticize him if they're not executing well against the pick.
What was the gist of that?
The gist of it is Trundle is overhyped and people only play it because they suck at jungling, whereas I feel like tempo is something that Meteos is super, super good at, and so he should never play Trundle, so I don't even necessarily think that like it's wrong for, like, they opened it actually in second game, they only banned it in 2 games, so.
Okay. Does that need a rebuttal, Croissant? Should we just move to another point?
I mean, just a really quick rebuttal is Xmithie can play that style. He can play
I think it's a bad style. Like, this is my entire fundamental point, though, is that, like, being able to understand tempo is what separates Meteos from basically any other jungle in NA.
Yeah, and I'm trying to say that Xmithie can play not the Trundle style, but he can play the Skarner tempo style. One thing that I think he played 3 straight games of it against Cloud9, and people were like, why didn't you ban the Skarner? And what happened every single game except for game 3 when Svenskeren finally adapted was Xmithie would clear literally all 6 of his camps and then get both scuttles. So he just get an 8 camp start, recall, get his jungle.
Arguably, that's not even good use of tempo, though. Like,
no, but like in that matchup, he would get a level or 2 ahead against Svenskeren, who wasn't on a. He knew that Svenskeren wouldn't gank really hard early, and just would get that tempo and then get to level 6 faster, and also make plays happen at level 5 too on Skarner. Right? I'm not saying he just power farmed, but what I'm saying is he can play that tempo style. And I do just argue that as long as you don't fall too far behind, you can give up some tempo in the early game to outscale in the mid and late game. And that is the fundamental concept behind Trundle. And while I agree with you that it's not really just, it's overhyped and it's not like an instant win condition, TL clearly knew how to play it, and Xmithie knew how to make it work to its full capacity, and did so against Meteos. And Meteos, if the problem is his bot lane needed to leash for him, then he should have called for that. But I think he didn't get that leash because Cody, Sun, and Afro were like, we want to get lane priority against Double Lift and Ole on this Caitlyn, or at least this level 1 start. We want to have a little better matchup. Well, that's just a decision that they made, and Meteos didn't go all in on that tempo style play. So I think that's another fault against Meteos, in that Xmithie can do what Meteos does, and then he can also play this other thing that maybe Meteos doesn't want to do because it's not optimal, but Xmithie makes it work, and his team makes it work.
I guess like my point is more that 100 Thieves aren't going to be Team Liquid playing a different way, not playing to the strength. And I don't think that that's because of Meteos. I just think, like, for example, their Baron setups aren't that good. Like, some of their champion pool issues in mid are pretty problematic. Yeah. They have a lot of other issues. So, like, the way that they were going to get an advantage against TL was not to play with a Trundle type setup, but to play like a tempo jungle type setup. So I don't necessarily think like him not playing Trundle in the final or in the playoffs is a huge criticism against Meteos.
You know what, as a general approach, this what the topic was of all time. This has just been like people arguing about this playoffs. And even worse, you both do the same thing. Like when he gives a specific example like that, the easiest way to destroy his example is not to address his specific example. It's to say, well, that's one example. And in this particular case, his team doesn't play that type of champion anyway. Therefore, that one example it actually is the outlier. And if he wants to, here's an example of where he did do something different. Here's an example of where he did something totally diverse, and generally either A, as you were attempting to apparently, you're arguing that he is as adaptive and able to vary what he does, or you say it's irrelevant anyway, and you say it doesn't matter if this style he has is superior, why would he want to do a different style anyway, and you go with that one. You've bridged the two and stuck between the two, and then both just agree with each other while they're disagreeing for 20 minutes. Like, which is it? Go one or the other.
I also think Meteos is adaptable, has been adaptable, more adaptable throughout his career than Xmithie. So if we're looking at the specific playoffs, like, yeah, okay, Xmithie brought out Trundle. I don't even necessarily think it's a good criticism against Meteos to say that like he didn't play that pick. So I would say overall that like Xmithie has adapted less in terms of champion pool than Meteos has.
The thing about this, Thorin, is I'm definitely have less experience than both of you in journalism and historical analysis and framing of these narratives. And so, yeah, when I tried to talk, I did try to talk a lot about how, you know, Xmithie went through this rough patch and then, wow, look at how amazing he did on all these different teams. And, but, you know, that's not, then it's like, oh, this isn't analytical enough. And then I try and go into a recent playoff series. While again, it doesn't capture the whole picture of greatest jungler of all time. I think when you look at the trajectory right now, I would just say that Xmithie, for the last 1 or 2 years of his career, will just have a better career than Meteos and will be definitely a better, you know, the best NA jungler of all time.
So here's the thing, okay, like, how about this? This is the main issue I see here, is that you both seem to actually be of the opinion that you are like Immanuel Kant and that you can use fucking reason and that there is an objective truth of who is better that you can quantify and actually specifically use experimental data to prove. Whereas as far as I can tell, who do you think is the best jungler of all time is a purely opinion-based topic with which you will hopefully use some examples to prove that you aren't just an idiot who just came up with an opinion sat in a cave looking at a wall. Presumably you want to say, here's an example, and I think that shows how broad point I think he's more adaptive. Oh, and you know what? Over the years, I mean, what amazes me about this debate is, it's not really a debate, but the point is I tried to set up the aspects so we'd get around it is, when you attack each other's points, what I don't understand is you never use any broad strokes. Like, it would have been, if you'd have said initially, I think he's more adaptive, and then she was like, well, he isn't because of this, and then you were like, oh, but he is because of this example. Then, for example, one of you could be like, he is more clutch. Oh, I disagree because of this example. Amazingly, you haven't got to know any of the topics, both of you, like this. Who works better with their teammates? Who has won more championships? Is that relevant? Is it not? You could have gotten into a great discussion about what relevance the junglers had over the years. You could say factors like who works better with bad teammates, who works well when he has a really stacked lineup. These are like the first places I would start, because what I would do primarily is I would have my opinion, you would have your opinion, I would then attack your opinion using certain examples and like smaller, more refined strokes. But what I don't understand is you both just keep picking one example and then you just go pro con on that one example until either one person concedes or the other person just says some get out like, yeah, but you didn't have to do that. Like, brilliant. Well, where have we got to now?
I feel like that was how this discussion was framed, though, right? Do you have one point? Do you have a response to that?
Sure.
So I tried to stay within that. But
here's the thing. The reason I did that, though, is because you both have a massive problem with when you're left on your own, which can be great for a normal talk show, just doing 15 minutes of points in a row. Now, the other person can't possibly keep track of that. Like, he could, but here's how you two would have to have an actual normal debate without a moderator. You'd have to both do what LS does when he views someone's VOD, and you'd have to send 20-minute responses to each other. The other person would stream themselves pausing that with spacebar, then addressing every single point one by one, and then drawing in MS Paint or something. That's a joke about LS, obviously. And then, and then obviously, in the case of LS, just mention that you win because you're the only one who knows what that champion's capable of from inside or something, because he is fucking Ghost in the Shell. No, so okay, let's get back on track then.
Yeah,
I've given you the little rant. Is there any other points on this topic? Like, here's an interesting way to do it is, I mean, maybe at the beginning we should have defined what makes a good jungler, because you've basically both done that, but you've backdoored it on all your questions. So is there another good point to make on this topic?
So I think the some of the examples you brought up are stuff that reason why we didn't go over them is I kind of dismissed them from the get-go, like working with teammates. It's hard to say whose fault that is.
What the fuck is this?
All this other stuff is
wait a minute.
It's true.
No, you're absolutely right. Yeah, no one can ever know that, Kelsey. Do you know what else you can never know? Any of the things you've postulated in this episode.
But you can.
Oh, so you know that when Meteos went to that wave and he took 2 minions only, he did that specifically knowing he would reset the wave and High would come back.
Why else would he do it, though?
No, that's not a question.
Like, otherwise he would take the entire...
Can't answer a question with a question.
No, otherwise he would take the entire wave. And it wouldn't reset. Like, if he was the jungler people thought he would take the entire wave instead of taking 2 minions so that the wave resets and it's for High.
You've created an empirical scenario here. So basically, if I go and ask Meteos now and he says he didn't do that because he knew about how to wave control, I concede that you were wrong.
Sure. But I think that, like, there's... Otherwise, like, why else would he do it? That makes no sense at all unless he did that.
Do you see the... apparently you two don't. So I think...
I do see what you're saying.
Debate is pointless. I mean, it's an opinion. Like, you actually think all opinions can be verified using, like, empirical data.
Some opinions just have more probabilistic outcomes. And I think that there's, like, a 95% chance that Meteos took those 2 minions because he wanted to reset the wave. But I do understand what you're saying about...
we can't know anything beyond that.
Yeah, we can't know for sure.
But there are some things that like we'll have a better idea of than others. For example, like the comm structure in the team, like how big of an input is X, or like who decides Y, and was this call made and these players just didn't react. Like all these comm structures are very different, so it's like a different type of argument and different type of discussion.
Okay, which is the point, which is that yes, you will never know that information. That's why it's called speculation. Do you not find it fun to speculate on things?
Oh yeah,
I do like it.
You could almost make a whole show and you could have the experts that know everything speculate on stuff, because here's the key thing: we'll never know. So the best we can do right now is we can all just say, well, we'll never know, so just shut it down. Or we could all just have fun speculating on stuff using expert knowledge, therefore interesting speculations that have some grounding in them. And then at times you could use actual data. Here's the thing: the data itself is actually not very good as like, I proved you wrong. That's actually pretty terrible, because if you notice, none of you succeeded in any of your examples you all give, none of you succeeded in making the other person say, I concede completely. The best you did was the other person just did what you just did, which is go, we can never really know. So that got you nowhere. Whereas instead, the best way you could have used each of the examples would be to just define your own opinion, to use that to explicate your own opinion further, at which point they would disagree, but not on your exact opinion, but they would explicate their own opinion more. And the winner would be the viewer.
I do think that Kelsey and I pushed back on certain topics, and I definitely agreed with some of the things that she said, and I was like, this is definitely something, and I think she did the same. I did try to speculate, right? I tried to speculate on what kind of teammate Xmithie is, and I got I felt like you both were not, or at least Kelsey wasn't really happy with how that kind of discussion comes about.
Here's what I don't understand, okay? The point I made to her about when she gave the wave control example is, she makes out like, because that's the only logical reason why he would do it, right? First of all, it's absolutely not the only possible reason. As we've already described, people do non-optimal things all the time. But yes, that would be the most likely thing to speculate.
Yeah.
Now, we're not talking about pure speculation. If you just said something completely random with nothing to base it on, yeah, that is of no value. But that's not what anyone would say with any of these opinions. Like, if you said a broad stroke thing like, I think Xmithie works better with bad teammates, whatever the example would be, obviously it's not going to leave, he's not going to leave it there, is he? You would then say, well, in what sense? Which bad teammates? I disagree that was a bad teammate. I would go to it. And in doing so, you would both actually explain your arguments way better. Like, I don't know why you would recommend that, Kelsey. When you talk about like Chinese League of Legends, you never speculate on anything other than pure meta players and like wave management and whether or not theoretically this champ should beat this champ. No. All the time when you talk, in fact, what's ridiculous about this, Kelsey, is you are someone who takes interviews, reverse engineers the answers into what you think about the player. You say, well, I talked to him actually, and he told me that when he works with a teammate like this, he often tries to do this. So now if players just lie to you, your entire philosophy on League of Legends is whack.
I'm not going to use that to describe whether or not this guy's the best jungler. Like, I'm not going to say...
No, here's the thing. By the way, I do think
I'm going to say, like, if we're talking more about, like, if the framework is, like, what is this conversation like, or what is this comm structure like? My bigger issue is that I don't necessarily think that makes that person like a better or worse jungler. Like, is he performing the function of the jungle correctly? Like, yes, what is the function of the jungler? And for me, the function of the jungler is based like a lot on, are you in the right location on the map at the correct time? Like, these are things that we can judge. Are you able to like play to the right side of the map and get that lane ahead? Like what he does after that could be your fault if it's something that you should be putting vision here so that he can continue to pressure his lead. You can put that on the jungler. The other option here is like, but I don't necessarily think, how they set up this comm structure makes him or doesn't make him the best jungler, because you have junglers who are calling exactly what's happening all the time, but you also have junglers who are like taking key from here, taking a lead from something else and deciding to like either react or not react to that call, who might not be as active in the communication system as well. So like that doesn't necessarily, like being the shot caller as a meme doesn't necessarily make you better at your individual role. Like no one would ever say that an AD carry is just like way better at last hitting because he shot calls, you know?
So we can do two things from here. We could talk about the bad teammate example or just something along those lines.
There's no point in doing that one, right? Because unless it's your point anyway, there's not very much point bringing it up, is there? So how about this? Just make a final point each, pro for the person that you think is the best ever, summarizing roughly what the best points are for each person.
Sure.
So in your case, Xmithie.
Yeah, in my case, Xmithie. And since Kelsey just did it a little bit, I'll do it too. We look at the framework of what makes the best jungler, right? My framework is how well does this player set up, how well does this player help the team to play to their win conditions? So there's two types. You can have win condition where you're just getting as big as you can as the jungler on Kha'Zix or something and taking over. You can also have a win condition where you're enabling your teammates and enabling your mid and late AD carry to go to late game and just win a team fight. Right? There's all these different things, but no matter what it is, you as a jungler have to do that because you're the most proactive, impactful player for the first few minutes. But it doesn't end there, right? Pathing doesn't end there. So the next part of what makes you the best jungler is how well can you set up for these mid to late game fights and control these decisions, because while your AD carry is just trying to get to his 4th and 5th item, you as the jungler have a lot more input on, okay, how do we set up for this Baron? How do we start it? And right, not every jungler does that. You have mid laners like Hai who do that. But I think, you know, the jungler's role extends not only from goes from early game, it's this kind of role, and then late game you have these kinds of general macro opinion things that you need to have to be a good jungler. And then what else makes you a good jungler? How well you work with your laners, your champion pool, right? All the things that we've talked about, right? You can recap all of them into that framework. And I think that Xmithie is the best jungler in North America because he fits all those points and he does them better than any other North American jungler has over the spread of 4 to 5 years, including Meteos. So
I think when Meteos first came to the LCS, he was changing a lot of the ways that people think about jungling. He wasn't just doing like the meme of farming and playing in team fights that everyone like describes Meteos' early time as. He was emphasizing efficiency much more in terms of his setups. I think that over the course of the years, I've never really seen, even against some of the best junglers internationally, I've never seen Meteos just like get like horrendously outclassed. Most of the times when Meteos screws up, it will be like level 1 invade cheese that isn't like necessarily going to be the defining factor of how you play out the game or how you play out the entire game. I think in mid to late game, he's very good at understanding if he needs to shadow which side laner, which is also like a very good element of playing jungle from mid to late. And I think that also Meteos has continuously like shown a foresight into what the enemy jungle is doing, been able to track them well, like in terms of putting vision where the enemy jungle will go next, if we take that as a parameter. And I think that like he kind of, even after his break, he showed up and he was like, whatever, you know, I still understand tempo and being first and backing first and getting vision first better than like all of these guys in the league. And I maybe took a week to get back to where I was on P1, but then I just looked like the better jungle option on that team. And he has performed so well within that setting that he ended up doing very well and being like a first top team choice in 100 Thieves and being a big part of how that team wins games by getting ahead early.
This video was supported by Dean Tanglis, Twch, Sanity, Gman, Kokupsi, Andreas Westerlund, Alex Adams, Mikkel Hansen, Jerky's Minion, Anthony, Bash, Daniel Yordanov, Yordan Tsenkov, VeXii, Kevin Haupt, Jason A, and Travis G. Greb. Want to suggest a guest to appear on my show or a topic to discuss? Perhaps you'd like to ask me a question. In 2018, for the first time in history, you can directly influence and support my content with the Patreon link below. Unlock the code to the streets and join the Scrilluminati today.